Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. My name is Farhan, also known as Gunner since '96, and we are making our debut today on YouTube. Normally we record and we release the audio on Apple Podcasts. On Apple Podcasts and Spotify and your other mainstream podcast streaming platforms. But today it's a special occasion. We have a special guest with us. We've got James Rowe NL on Twitter. You can find him. He's a football journalist and he regularly writes for Football CFB as well as Secret Footballer. He's been regularly featured on Talk Sport, on Love Sport Radio. So look, James, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for the invite. Nice to say hello to a new audience too. I hope everybody's keeping well in these strange times.
Absolutely, yeah. Likewise. For those of you that are new, for those of you that haven't listened to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast, the purpose of the podcast show is I'll give you the history. I started this a few months ago, and I was at a tipping point when Arsenal lost to Burnley, funnily enough, and that caused me to make this podcast so that I can unravel my own brain, try and make sense of all the craziness that's going on at Arsenal, especially, that game itself when we lost at the Emirates. It was one of the lowest points of our season. So that's why I called it the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. I usually sit by myself and talk for an hour, but today I'm blessed to have you here with me. So we're going to unravel the game itself that we witnessed today, the 1-1 draw at Turf Moor, which wasn't good enough in my opinion. But look, we're here. We're going to discuss all of the good, the bad, the evil, the ugly, everything. First of all, James, if you wouldn't mind just letting us know, I mean, I've given you a brief introduction. I don't think I did it justice. So just let us know, who you are, what you do, etc., etc.
Okay, that's fine. Good evening, everybody. For the people that are hearing me for the first time, my name is James Rowe. I'm originally from the UK. I emigrated to the Netherlands nearly 15 years ago. I've been an Arsenal fan for more than 30 years, and I would often attend matches from the Netherlands before COVID. And for the last 4.5 years, I've been interviewing professional players and managers at all levels of world football. This Wednesday, coincidentally with a former Gooner in Cohen Bramall, we'll see my 300th publication. And my current publishers are the Secret Footballer website as well as Football CFB. And I look back on a great portfolio the last 4.5 years, including the likes of Jamie Carragher, Simon Barker, Graham Potter, Bob Wilson. I always say that every professional player or manager has a story to tell, and it's about doing everybody justice. And you realise that it's a world game, and it's been a hell of a journey the last 4.5 years, but nowhere near finished. And it's great to come onto different podcasts from time to time and give a different perspective as well, because obviously in my privileged position, my perspective is a little bit different to that of just a normal fan, for example.
I mean, some big names you mentioned there. And actually, it's a good segue to lead us on to the game itself. We're obviously going to touch on your profession and, how that relationship, how it's different compared to what fans, see of players and how we talk about them. Obviously, you have a completely different view on that. So yeah, we'll touch on that right at the end. But like I said, it's a good segue to lead us on to talking about the game itself. So we all came into this game with the impression that it was going to be an easy 3 points. It was going to be a continuation of the great performance that we saw at Leicester, the great performance that we saw against Benfica. It obviously wasn't meant to be. But as you mentioned, great names. Let's have a little look at the starting 11 of who started for us today, and whether we had any quote unquote great names on offer for us. I'll let you start. I mean, when you first, I mean, they usually release the starting lineup an hour before, and it gives us a good idea to see what Arteta's plan is, how he's approaching the game, what sort of personalities are on the pitch. What were your first impressions when you first saw the lineup come up?
My first impressions is that he's got one eye on prioritising the first leg on Thursday in the Europa League. That was my first impression. And I can understand the clamour from the fans' point of view of the Champions League and top four and all the bright lights. But if I'm brutally honest, Farhad, we're not ready for Champions League football. We're not ready off the pitch, and we're certainly not ready on it. And if you look at how quickly the European game has changed, this isn't FIFA. This isn't fantasy football. This is real life football. And one thing in particular with the Europa League is there's always a team in the Europa League which comes out of nowhere and reaches the final. Like, for example, Ajax in 2017, Marseille in 2018, even going back to Dnipro when they lost to Sevilla in the final. I think nobody expected Slavia Prague to beat Leicester, and we were very lucky to scrape past Benfica, in my opinion. And when the draw for Olympiacos come out, all of a sudden the rhetoric from the fan base was revenge. Never mind revenge, we've tried to get to the next round. And I think we're in danger of taking Olympiacos a little bit too lightly. And I think the team selection today kind of mirrored that a little bit. You know, when you're going to Leicester, that you're a good physical team up for a fight, and they kind of had a decent game plan as well. We've had a very strange season as well. We've had a very strange season in all facets where we haven't really got going. It's still very much a work in progress. But I've often said on many different podcasts, Farhad, that it starts at the top with us as a football club, where we have an owner who just views Arsenal as a healthy investment. That's it. He's not concerned about the sporting measures. He's not concerned about sporting ambition. He may well be for LA Rams and Denver Nuggets and Colorado Rapids, but not for us. And we can make all the changes we want, but until we have a new owner come in and sweep the board completely clean and have the welfare of the club at heart. I mean, you look at Leicester. Leicester had a tragedy in their owner, and his successor was someone who kept the welfare of the club in first place. And look at what Leicester are doing. I'm certain if Arsenal signed players like Timothy Castagne, Sonjiku, and Dennis Praet, the Arsenal fans would have a fit. When Dennis Praet, for example, has a previous at Sampdoria and Anderlecht. Timothy Castagne, having spoken to former teammates of his, even when he was at Genk, he was a great player. And also it's become like a running, I wouldn't say joke, because I rate him extremely highly. I've made no secret of the fact that I rate Mark Albrighton at Leicester extremely highly. How on earth he's not been capped by England, I'll never know. If I was England manager, it'd be the first name on my team sheet, along with Vardy. But that's a different story. Mark Albrighton has won a league title. It was important for Leicester in that league title win, as important as Jamie Vardy, as important as Riyad Mahrez. But yet I have Arsenal fans on Twitter telling me that Mark Albrighton's rubbish and he's not good enough to play for Arsenal. But yet he's a Premier League winner. And I think the younger fan base of Arsenal, rather than looking at characteristics like hard work, previous, and whether a player is injury prone, they're too quick to go for the name and the clout and the price tag. But in the real world, it doesn't work like that. And for example, Manchester City are running away with things. But I'll give you an example about Ruben Dias. I've known about Ruben Dias since he was at Braga, and then going from Braga to Benfica and Manchester City. But they've identified a fantastic footballer. And, this is what I mean about identifying players. And I just think Arsenal at the minute, I just think we're in very much a malaise. We had we come off the back of a manager of 22 years, and then you give his successor 18 months. And then you kind of, the first sign of trouble, you drop him like a bad habit. And then an inexperienced manager comes in who's still finding his feet. And obviously, we've got the Ozil situation and recently taking out a huge monetary loan as well. And 2.5 million of that loan was sanctioned for the Odegaard deal within 5 minutes. I'm not a businessman. I don't run any businesses. But if you've just been given a loan of an awful lot of money and you use that money straight away to pay a loan fee for a player who is unlikely to sign for Arsenal on a permanent basis, I think it's a prime example that the club's not being run properly.
James, you make some excellent points. It's as if he was reading my mind when you were mentioning names like Albrighton, Dennis Praet. The Leicester example is a perfect example to just. I mean, we don't even need to look at we don't even need to look at Leicester. You only need to go as far as maybe even looking at West Ham. I mean, Man City are the perfect example of how an organization should be run. And the promises that we were fed that moving to the Emirates was going to be the next step, was going to be where we were going to be contenders for European titles, contending with the likes of Bayern Munich. How on earth did we get to this place is the question that I was asking myself throughout the game against Burnley, when Xhaka, whatever happened to Xhaka happened, and when the goal went in, it wasn't the first time where this season where my heart sank. And it was a genuine feeling of, I saw it, I was in the middle of tweeting something, I saw it, and then it just, a massive amount of weight just went into my chest, and I could just feel myself sinking, going, here we go again. And it's amazing that you make the point about this being so much bigger than a football match, this being so much bigger than Arteta's problems, or so much bigger than whether the right players are on the pitch or not. Ultimately, the reason why we are 10th in the league, ultimately, the reason why we have failed season in, season out, is because, as you say it, the ownership doesn't care. The ownership has never cared, and it's been a recurring cycle year in, year out. And I'm a little bit irritated at myself, number one, for not being at the forefront and for not making as much noise as possible as maybe I should have back when Kroenke was on the verge of taking over 100%. Buying out smaller stakeholders, buying out the fans. I don't think us fans did enough to make as much noise as possible to at least let this guy know what this club means to us. Because, Arsenal Football Club for me is a unique club. It's a unique club in the sense that we have emigrated from across the city. It's a unique club in the sense that we don't belong in any geographical location. Arsenal, the name itself, doesn't belong to any place. It's a foundation that was formed by a group of men who were working in an armament factory that wanted to kick a ball about, and that grew very gradually, and that earned the respect and earned the right to play the game, to play the beautiful game. Some people forget this, but we are the blueprint for teams like Manchester City. When teams like Manchester City came about and they started to grow with their new ownership, people almost forget that it was a number of Arsenal players that was the core foundation of their backbone that allowed them to grow into what they are today. And it pains me, and it really does sadden me to see us being driven into the current state we are. And swaying away a little bit from that, I just want to talk about the team lineup, and I just want to talk about how what my initial feelings were. And I think in the last, it's only now actually where it's hit me, like the penny's dropped. The penny's finally dropped, and I know what the problem is. Because I can no longer look at Arteta and I can no longer look at the players. I can look at the leadership. And the reason why I can look at the leadership is because that game epitomized everything that's wrong with Arsenal Football Club. The fact that we're now competing with Burnley shows me that there is something awfully wrong. There is a rot, which is very, very deep. And the results of this rot come down to the starting 11. You've got Chambers that starts on the right, David Luiz that starts in the middle with Mari, Tierney on the left, Partey and Xhaka down the middle, Saka, Odegaard, Willian and Aubamayang. Forgetting about what's happened this season, let's imagine this is a brand new season, right? We're at the beginning of the season, we're playing Burnley. You have a look at that team lineup. How many of those players are fit to play for a top elite club? And this is where the problems are. The problem started with Kroenke not caring, specifically not caring enough to dip into his pocket and to invest so that we can buy the right players. David Luiz, for me, does not start for a top club in Europe. Chambers, unfortunately, does not start in a top club in Europe. Mari, no. Xhaka, no. Willian, no. Aubameyang, to some extent, some might say no. Some might say he's past it. Some might say he's got the goals. He's carried the club for the last 2 seasons. Unfortunately, now he's at the latter end of his career. He won't make it in top clubs. So when I first initially looked at the first team lineup, I thought to myself, you know what, this isn't a bad side. Chambers has come back from injury. Before he got injured, he showed that, you know, he was getting better, he was improving. There is a player in there. David Luiz has done pretty well. You know, this season he's carried the defense through. He's had good performances. He has been the standout performer in our centre back, and whether it be partnered with Mari or Gabriel, he seemed to have been quite strong. He seemed to have been quite dominant in that area. Tierney, we know what we can expect from Tierney. Granit Xhaka, when he's partnered Thomas Partey, alongside Thomas Partey, Granit Xhaka has looked a different beast. He's looked really, really solid and strong. He's given some really good performances of late. And we've seen a different player in Granit Xhaka. Willian, in the last few days against Benfica, against Leicester, has showed what he's capable of delivering. So why did we get the result that we got? That's the question that I keep asking myself. And like I said, the penny dropped. After this game, the penny dropped. And I finally, you know, I was finally being true to myself and honest to myself that, look, half of these boys aren't good enough to play for a top team. We're mid-table because we have mid-table players, type of players. So swaying away from the starting 11, let's have a talk about the game itself. Let's have a talk about the first half, some key talking moments. And we should probably talk about the goal, which came in the first opening 5 minutes. It's very unlike Arsenal to score early on, but it's very like Arsenal to concede early on. So what can you tell us about the first goal? How did you see it? Was it a surprise that, you know, we scored early on?
For me, it was, and I thought it's a save that could have been made by Nick Pope. I thought he himself knows that he could have saved that. And you touch on Aubameyang. I wanted to bring up a point. I recently spoke to a former Arsenal scout, David Luiz, who played for Chelsea, was capped by England at under 21 level. He scouted for Arsenal, and when I spoke to him, he said to me the following. He said, I really enjoyed my time at Arsenal. Fantastic club, brilliant people, wonderful place to work. Everything was going so well until we was all made redundant. When 55 of them was made redundant, including scouting staff, literally to make sure that we could afford the Aubameyang deal. Aubameyang is a very good striker, but when you have to literally bow down and beg and eulogize a player to some extent that before the FA Cup final had not won a single trophy with Arsenal, I think it's a little bit too much. And, you know, Ian Wright is an Arsenal legend. He really is. The same as Dennis Bergkamp, the same as Thierry Henry. Fantastic legends in their own right, all three of them, as individuals and also as collectives. But for example, when you see Ian Wright doing the promo after Aubameyang signed and saying, oh, it's amazing, it's brilliant. And then Aubameyang saying that, you know, he wants to be like a Thierry Henry, he wants to be like a Bergkamp, he wants to be like Ian Wright and win a Premier League title. He must have seen Arsenal coming. Because if you go back to the very early days of a player, this was a player who was at AC Milan, and AC Milan let him go, Fardan, because of his attitude. I know he was very young, but AC Milan, they're not silly. If they let a player go on an attitude basis, they thought long and hard about it. The same with St Etienne. St Etienne are a well-respected club in France. There were rumours of that there as well. And Arsenal fans in particular, they really have put Aubameyang on a bit of a pedestal. Yes, he turned up in the FA Cup final, and thank goodness. Otherwise, there wouldn't have really been no basis to give him that contract, would there really? But I think it's also the form of desperation of, you know, in the Europa League final, he didn't turn up in that final. In the semi-final, yes, he was apparent at Valencia, for example, home and away, and working very hard. But these small, minute moments, and on the pitch today, Xhaka, he's been capped so many times by Switzerland. Play for Mönchengladbach, who are not a small football club. You need to be a good player to play for Gladbach, but he's far too nonchalant, far too comfortable. The same with David Luiz. David Luiz seems to have the naivety to think that he can plan a career, and that's what annoys me. It's not so much the on the pitch performances of lax play and lack of concentration, but you know, he's forever telling people that he wants to finish his career in Benfica. I've spoken to enough players at all different levels, young and old, who tell me that your career goes by in the blink of an eye, and you can't plan a career. You can have hopes and ambitions, but you can't plan a career. You could suffer a very bad injury, a new manager could come in, you could be marginalised. And in the case of David Luiz and Willian, they've got what they want, which is an extra term on their contracts. Pablo Mari was playing for NAC Breda in the Netherlands 4 seasons ago. He was captain of NAC Breda. Pablo Mari, by his own admission, said when he was given the captain's armband of NAC Breda when he was playing in the Eredivisie, he said, "What are you giving it to me for?" He said, "I can't speak Dutch. I can't. This club is a well-respected club, and it is. They're very much on their way back to their Dutch Eredivisie NAC Breda. But via Flamengo, Pablo Mari is now playing for Arsenal. The Dutch Eredivisie is often maligned in some quarters as being a farmers' league, which is nothing could be further from the truth. A lot of it is ignorance. There's many good players in this league. Having watched it firsthand for more than a decade, I can vouch for that. But a lot of it is ignorance. But I just think we are a bit of a mismatch of players that are just far too comfortable, that know that they're going to be okay, that know that they're going to be eulogised by fans come what may. I think as well with Aubamayang, the social media aspect as well. You don't catch Lewandowski doing that. You don't catch Haaland doing that. But these are two driven strikers that their craft and their profession is number one. And it's as if with Aubameyang, that he can that if he chats with a couple of known faces on social media, he's always going to be all right. But when your career's finished and you look back, did you really do enough? I mean, it's the same with Hector Bellerin. Hector Bellerin has been at Arsenal for such a long time. You see him being more prevalent on TV commercials and activism rather than his profession. Yes, it's very good and very interesting, and I take my hat off that he's raising issues about raising awareness about different issues. Really, really good and great. More power to him. But first and foremost, he's a footballer. You can do that once your career is finished. You can do whatever when your career is finished, by all means. But at the moment, you're an Arsenal player, and I just think at the moment we're just a bit of a mishmash of different players that they've got their eye elsewhere. You can tell they've got their eye elsewhere. Their eye is not completely on Arsenal. Their eyes are on what happens after their career. Their eyes are on their next club. Their eyes are on whatever they want to do. And obviously there are shining lights in the likes of Bukayo Saka, but he is very, very young, and you can't expect him to do everything. But I thought he showed a lot of maturity today, especially after he was booked. I thought that the way that he kept going forward and kept trying, he didn't give up and kind of go into his shell. He kind of kept trying to get forward and make those 1-2s. And I think he showed a different kind of maturity today. And I just think that a lot of Arsenal fans in particular, they forget that it's a long old season. It's not FIFA where you can complete a season in a couple of hours. This is 9 months of hard work, injuries, transfers, speculation, lots of different things. And I've been saying on different podcasts as well that for me, it's just about getting through the season in one piece ahead of extensive work in the summer. And, we've only got 11 Premier League games left. We're only in the Europa League. As much as I would love to see Arsenal win a European trophy again, because I was very young when we won it last time in 1994, I just can't see it happening. People have accused me of negativity, but who would have thought that Slavia Prague would beat Leicester? Young boys playing on AstroTurf in the second leg in Bern will give Ajax and run them very, very close. Dynamo Kiev as well against Villarreal. It's not simply a case of 1, 2, 3. And I believe we'll get through against Olympiacos.
Sorry, mate. I think your audio is cut off.
Yeah, well, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Perfect.
Sorry about that technology, eh? The wonders of technology, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody's okay.
No, that's fine.
As much as I would love to see Arsenal win the Europa League, I really can't see it. I thought we were exceptionally lucky against Benfica, and also another thing as well, maybe I'm showing my football reporting side and maybe a bit of a geeky side, but I thought the way that some Arsenal fans spoke about Benfica, I couldn't believe it. You know, this is a team who have won 37 Portuguese titles, 2 European Cups, and 26 Portuguese Cups. This club is an absolutely massive football club. I've seen it with my own eyes. And for Arsenal fans to literally brush them off before the game was played as if they're just another kind of cannon fodder. I mean, as I touched on, before the COVID outbreak, I would return to London to watch. I would used to prioritise European games, and I would go back for. In the season we reached the Europa League final, I missed 2 European home games, one against Karabakh and one against Valencia. I managed to catch the rest, and I thought that with playing the likes of Bati Borisov and Rennes, that people were just, if it's not Bayern Munich, Real Madrid or Barcelona, they're not interested. But then we were extremely lucky. You know, in that game at the Emirates, they hit the bar, they hit the post. If they'd scored that away goal, that would have been it. It would have been finished. And also the ignorance for how, you know, apart from all the money involved in football, Farhad, apart from all the obvious things that have happened, you know, the biggest thing that's happened is the gap between the smaller European teams and the season's European teams has been decreasing year upon year upon year due to better coaching, better players. Like, for example, we're playing Olympiacos on Thursday. They have the likes of Younes El Arabi, who's a fantastic Moroccan striker.
They're no mugs. They're no mugs.
The likes of Yann Villa, who's very well experienced, also plays for Rennes. And also Jose Holobas. So I remember, I might be showing my age here, but I remember going to watch Arsenal Olympiacos in the Champions League in 2011, I believe. I think it was 2011. And Jose Holobas was in his first stint at the club. And very rarely was Bakary Sagna skinned. But Holobas had him on toast the entire game. And I was on the block 116 on the 18-yard box just in the clock end, and I just thought, you know, Holobas, even then, you know, go and pick him up. He looks like a great player. But as you say, Olympiacos are no mugs, and we're going to find it tough. I just thought the rhetoric of revenge, I thought that was completely unnecessary. You know, I saw a lot of similarities in the Benfica first leg, you know, as I did in Olympiacos the season before. So we've got to keep our wits about us, and it's not going to be easy at all, but be very interesting to see what happens.
Very, very interesting indeed. And look, you know, you mentioned the Europa League, and I think this season, maybe even last season, the Europa League has become, it's always been a Champions League B competition, but more so now than ever before. We used to slag off the Europa League. We used to laugh at teams that used to play in the Europa League. Have a look at the caliber of teams that are playing in the Europa League. It's not an easy competition to win. The best opportunity that Arsenal had was when we got to the finals against Chelsea. If we had won it then, that would have been an amazing achievement, because even that year was difficult. But we're finding year on year, and you know, I don't know whether it will maybe fix itself once the European Super League is created. I don't know what's going on with that, whether it will actually happen or not. But up until then, with, like you say, the type of European sides that are coming up and that are, and I think we're living in an age now where there's no longer looking for who is the next superstar. It's about what kind of superstars can we create in our own four walls? And there are so many out there. There are way too many out there to count. And it's just about the right timing and the right clubs being able to identify them and taking them on. And the Europa League is a fantastic competition to showcase these unknowns, these hidden gems. And Arsenal used to be at the forefront to purchase hidden gems. We're talking about the likes of Abu Diaby, Alexander Kleb, Bakary Sagna, Gael Clichy. The list goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden, Arsenal have become this side where they have, like you said, you mentioned they've made 55 redundant, completely abolished their scouting network, have gone towards more analytical side of things, and in doing so have made purchases such as Granit Xhaka, Gabriel Palista, Mustafi. And I don't seem to understand how, as a club, we feel like this is helping us to move forward. And I always call the period where, you know, we're talking about post Thierry Henry, where we were effectively building the next batch of superstars in Alexandra Kleb, Alex Song, Thomas Rosicky, Aaron Ramsey. Had we had kept all of those individuals, I do genuinely believe we could have potentially have won another league title or potentially have gone to another Champions League final. But where the business side of things have let us down, and again, it goes back to the board members, it goes back to the executives, it goes back to Ivan Gazidis. How much power did Wenger have when KSC bought us out 100%? Where do you see the in the timeline where, you know, you've got the Invincibles, you've got in the middle Arsenal trying to recreate this young batch of Invincibilites, and then now where we are? Where do you think, where did we go wrong in that timeline?
Well, I'd like to make two important points. First one is David Dean. I think when he left, we'd suffered. And then for new people seeing me tonight for the first time, I'd like to give a very important point about Ivan Gazidis. Obviously, being based in the Netherlands like I am, and the ability to interview Dutch players and managers in their mother tongue, when you speak to them in Dutch, you get a lot more information. Recently, Robin van Persie did a podcast in his mother tongue where he was explaining to the Dutch-speaking podcast, that he really did not see eye to eye with even Ivan Gazidis. Ivan Gazidis was trying to show Robin van Persie pie charts and graphs as to the success of the football club off the pitch, to which Robin van Persie's response was, I'm not interested in any of that. I want to win things. And it looked for all the world that Robin van Persie was going to sign for Juventus. But Gazidis did not get on with his Juventus counterpart, even to the point where he wouldn't even pick up his phone. So Robin van Persie is thinking that he's going to Juventus. And he even said to the board and to the important people at the club, if you do not get this over the line that I go abroad, you run the risk of me signing for a domestic rival. It wasn't a threat. It was just a normal thing that he said. Ivan Gazidis proceeds to go on a holiday in the middle of the summer transfer window, a personal holiday. So Robin van Persie is in limbo, thinking that he's going to sign for Juventus, wanting clarity, and Gazidis has gone on a personal holiday. Gazidis didn't get on with his Juventus counterpart, hence why the deal was not done, and Van Persie ends up going to Manchester United. So the rhetoric that Arsenal fans have regarding Van Persie, obviously my perspective is a little bit different, because I've heard exactly what he has to say about it in his mother tongue. So it's nice to translate that for Arsenal fans that don't know and realise that he's not the boogeyman. You know, if anything, he was trying to kind of warn the board of what's going on, but they didn't heed any of his warnings at all. And as for Gazidis, you see at Milan now, I don't know how much of a impact that he has, but Gazidis, I think he always harboured ambitions of being the commissioner of the MLS, and I think he still wants that job at some point in his career. But I just think that it's been a real, at board level, you've got Edu and Willian having the same agent. How does that work? You've got someone behind the scenes who helps with contract negotiations and offers contract negotiations, and then has the same agent as the player. With Raul Signelli as well, with his famous contact books. Raul Signelli was sent away by Barcelona. Barcelona may be many things, but they are ruthless. And if you can't add anything to them as an organisation, you're literally useless to them. You have no use to them. And Mislintat as well. Mislintat left for Stuttgart. Stuttgart have made a huge rapid rise, have returned to the Bundesliga, drew away with Frankfurt today. They've only been back 5 minutes, but they look as if they've been back in the Bundesliga for years. So it just goes to show the strange decisions that Arsenal have taken. But I don't think that this vicious circle will be broken until a new board comes in, until a new owner comes in with fresh ideas. Like, for example, a lot of people talk about Mark Overmars here in the Netherlands. A lot of Arsenal fans are hoping that Overmars, when he leaves Ajax, will rock up at Arsenal. I think first and foremost, he's going to take a little bit of a break. But I like to tell people that a lot of people think the job that Overmars did at Ajax, a lot of people think that that's his first job. It's not. Overmars did exactly the same job for the team he used to play for, Go Ahead Eagles. and he did an even better job than the one he did at Ajax. Yes, Ajax reached a Champions League semi-final and under his watch together with Van der Sar, but when he was at Go Ahead Eagles, he literally helped the club to avoid extinction, really. And he really hammered down on the financial aspects and making sure that everything's okay. And I might ruffle a few fans' feathers here, but I've heard a few people say to me that they wouldn't be surprised if Aubamayang ends up at United. And if that does happen, then again, it's another missed trick by Arsenal, where someone who's got extensive experience at Go Ahead Eagles and Ajax could end up going to a domestic rival in the Premier League. I'm not saying it's going to happen. It is a possibility. I think first and foremost, they'll be taking a break. But I see a lot of Arsenal fans on Twitter putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. But it's just nice in the case of being based where I am and knowing what I know. It's nice to kind of give a different perspective in that respect.
Okay, very interesting. So it's a bit frustrating now because we've spoken about all the issues that are going in and around the club, and the issues that have been happening for years on end now, ever since we've moved to the Emirates, ever since KSC have been involved. So, I mean, in my head, I'm just thinking there isn't much significance talking about the Arsenal Burnley game. There isn't much significance talking about the Arsenal Olympiacos game because at the end of the day, as long as KSC are involved, we're just going to be going around and around in circles. But it is incredibly significant that Arsenal Football Club compete in Europe and compete in the league, because if we don't, then we risk becoming Newcastle United. And it's been a running joke that's been going on for years. If Arsenal aren't careful, they're going to be the next Newcastle United. And now we're seeing it becoming a reality, because there was a time where fans were impatient with Arsene Wenger for not winning the league title year in, year out. There was a time where fans were impatient with Arsene Wenger for constantly finishing top 4. It was as if fans wanted us to not finish top 4, and hell behold, we didn't. A season came where we dropped out of the top 4. We then started to finish in the Europa League places quite regularly. It became a little bit boring. We wanted to get back into the Champions League, and now we find ourselves potentially for the first time in God knows how many years, Arsenal dropping out of all European competitions. But look, I genuinely do want to talk about this game because I think it epitomizes all the problems that is wrong with Arsenal. And I want to link this to the direction we're heading in, because I genuinely believe that Arsenal Football Club have all the potential and have all the abilities in the world to turn this boat around, to turn the ship around. Because when I look at Arteta, I look at a manager who is competent and who is talented enough to try and make something of Arsenal. As bad as a club we're being run, and as bad as a position that we are in at the minute, I genuinely feel like Arteta has the talent, has the capabilities, and he himself has the belief and the passion that he can turn things around at Arsenal. But this game highlighted a lot of problems for me. Let's talk about the first half. Let's talk about some of the things that Arsenal did well and some of the things that maybe were warning signs leading up to the second half. What do you think Arsenal did well in that first half?
Well, I thought they started with a fair bit of confidence. I thought they looked, playing the ball around, looking to get forward, even William with the width as well, providing driving forward. But I just got the impression, fella, that when they scored the first goal, they thought that was it. It was all smiles. First goal's gone in. That's it. We've won this one. Doesn't work like that. We've had enough results this season at home to Aston Villa, at home to Leicester, away at Leeds, to know that it's not over until the final whistle blows. And I think as well with the mentality of the team as well, there's no real leaders in that team. It's just a mishmash of players who are just kind of like thrown together, and they all know individually that they're going to be all right. And I think to them, that's the most important thing. I saw a very interesting tweet today that says, can you imagine the fans in the stadium this season, home and away, who would have paid good money to see that and to watch that, how much more vocal they would have been. And I just think that at the moment, we're relying very heavily on Bukayo Saka. He's still very young. You've got to protect him as well. I think as well with Kieran Tierney. I think he shows great leadership skills. I thought, as the game went on, in the start of the second half, it was very similar to the Wolves game where we started well, looked confident, looked composed, and then, decided to take our eye off the ball, excuse the pun. But we've done that too many times. We've done that too many times this season. But I really do believe that's down to the character of certain players that we have, and it's not going to change overnight. It's not going to change overnight. Thomas Partey, for example, I might be controversial here, Farad, but it was a completely unnecessary signing. Completely unnecessary. When he signed, all I heard from people was, "Oh, a new Vieira. We haven't had a player like that since Patrick Vieira." Well, of course we haven't had a player like that since Patrick Vieira, because you can't go out and find another Patrick Vieira. I've seen Thomas Partey play live in the Super Cup final against Real Madrid in Tallinn in 2018. Yes, he is a very physical specimen, and he looks very daunting to come up against. But that shot where he shot it, over the bar, I think they're still looking for the ball. I think it was so wide off target, and also his wages, Farad, are £260,000 a week. We've got as a club Aubameyang, Lacazette. We had Ozil until we shifted him. We've got some very big players on some huge wages, and on a Europa League budget or a non-European football budget, it's not sustainable, is it? But the biggest worry for me is those players will leave, and they will leave still being eulogized by some sections of the fans. Oh, it's not his fault he had to leave. Oh, it's the club. But yet, some of these players are partly responsible for the position that we find ourselves in. So it's as if they know what's going on behind the scenes. Arsenal have recently sanctioned a £120 million loan in the middle of a pandemic, but £120 million is an awful lot of money. And it's as if the players know that eventually things are going to come to a head, and some of them will go away from the club, and they'll kind of be sent off with within all the blessings of the fans, as if they did nothing wrong. And I think that's also quite dangerous as well.
Interesting. Just before I add my 2 cents on the first half, how I felt Arsenal did, there's a few comments here, so I'm just going to run through them. One coming from Ashton Ullman that says, since 2010, we have a negative of 500 million in transfers. Dortmund are 75 million in profit. Sevilla are 35 million in profit. What do you think about that?
First and foremost, I think it's a very clever observation. A very clever observation, first and foremost. Very well done. I think the dynamic of both Sevilla and Dortmund, obviously they meet in the Champions League this week. Sevilla with Lopetegui, Dortmund as well with the likes of Haaland, with the likes of Bellingham, and the likes of Sancho. Sevilla have also got some very good players. Behind the scenes, these are clubs that have been working very, very hard. You've got the likes of Michael Sorek at Dortmund, who's well known for being very ruthless. And Sevilla as well, with the hard work they do behind the scenes. And they seem to identify talent better. And whereas in the Premier League, I'll give you an example. There's a player playing for Sporting Club de Portugal, Suhai Fedal. Played over, I think, 50 times for Real Betis, has extensive experience in La Liga, capped by Morocco. Sporting Lisbon are unbeaten in Portugal this season, and he's been a big part of that. Do you know what his transfer fee was?
No.
From Real Betis to Sporting Lisbon? 3 million euros. 3 million euros. And this is how clever.
Wow.
I'm not naive enough to know that if a Premier League club had asked Real Betis, how much do you want for Suhai Fedal, they would have been quoted at least 5 times as much. But it's still about nipping it in the bud and getting it done early. And, this is what I mean about identifying players. We don't seem to do that. I see a lot of Arsenal fans drawing up lists of who we could buy in the summer, giving all their statistics, giving all their reasons as to why we should buy this player and buy that player. But they seem to never take into account what happens with young players when things don't work out. And we have a case in point in William Saliba. But yet people still continue to make their lists. People still continue to say, oh, he would be a great buy for Arsenal. Well, not if he's not going to play. I've spoken to many, many different players, young players, Farad, who have moved abroad to play for a professional football club. And many of these young players, when they move abroad for the first time, they're living independently on their own for the first time. They're gaining life skills. They're learning how to cook. They're learning how to look after themselves. They're away from home for the first time. The club becomes your family. Now, in the case of William Saliba, what must he be thinking? He sees his former partner, Wesley Fofana, playing for Leicester regularly. They were in a partnership together that got St Etienne to the French Cup final where they just lost. And then Fofana signs for Leicester, Saliba signs for Arsenal. Fofana sees his former partner in central defence playing games, and Saliba is playing under 23s. And this is a player who's compared to Rafael Varane. This is a player who's extremely highly rated, and he's losing a lot of time now. Yes, he's back at Nice and he's playing games. And then you see Arsenal fans panicking, saying, "Oh, we shouldn't have sent him out on loan. Look what he's doing. Look at Donny van der Beek at Manchester United." There was a famous quote from the Dutch legend Marco van Basten on a Dutch talk show a couple of months ago, where he was asked for his opinion about Donny van der Beek. And Van Basten, who's a legend at international level and also club level, Van Basten said the following: "It's not healthy. It's not healthy for such a player with so much experience at club level and international level to not be playing." And this is a lot of Arsenal fans who compile their lists and give all their expert opinion. They don't see behind the footballer the human side of it. There is nothing worse for a player, regardless of age, regardless of status. There's nothing worse for a player when they don't play, especially if they're abroad. And we seem to think we can stockpile players. I remember when I spoke to, do you remember Sanchez Watt? Going back a few years.
Yeah.
But do you remember Sanchez Watt? I spoke to him about, I think it was 2 years ago now. And he made a really interesting point to me. He said, James, when I was at Arsenal, he said a lot of my fellow scholars and a lot of my fellow age group didn't want to go out on loan. They all wanted to stay training with the first team. But he went out on loan to Leeds, and he said he was really well looked after, and they really took him in as one of their own. And he went on to have a good career. And I just think at the fan base as well, like I thought it was very distasteful about Saliba when I had a lot of Arsenal fans on my timeline saying, "Oh, he said this in an interview, he said that." And on one particular occasion, I asked the Arsenal fan, I said, "Can you tell me who said that? Can you tell me who your quotes are?" "Oh, the network." I said, "I'm not talking about networks." I said, "Can you tell me who gave you the quotes for that interview?" And he said, "Oh, I can't." I said, "Well," I interview in the foreign languages. I interview in Dutch is a foreign language and also Spanish as well. When I release an interview on Football CFB or The Secret Footballer, my name is on it. So everything that is said by the player, whether they are a player playing at the top end, whether they are a Dutch player playing somewhere in Europe, everything that is said, my name is on it. So I'm responsible for everything. But a lot of things get lost in translation, and I think that's what a lot of Arsenal fans forget. They really do. And in the case of Saliba, I don't think we'll see him playing in an Arsenal shirt again. But yet they still persist. The fans still persist with buying. Well, what's to say that we don't learn from our mistakes and another player comes in from abroad and we have the same situation as we have with Saliba? We seem to never learn from our mistakes in that respect.
Yes, again, you make some really interesting points. The whole Saliba saga, the way it was carried out in the summer, the way it's been carried out since Arteta's come in. Somebody has to take responsibility for it, and again, it just epitomizes everything that is wrong with the club from top to bottom. There is no leadership, there is no organization, there is no one taking initiative, and that's the best word to describe what is lacking at Arsenal: initiative. I've got another question here from Out and Out Gunner podcast, who asked, James, do you see Gravenberch as the perfect partner for Partey, or would you go for Koopmeiners instead?
And again, a great question. I should come on here more often. I think your questions are brilliant. Well done to the viewers. To give people a little bit of update, Gravenberch is still very young. He's very hungry, extremely hungry, but it'd be very interesting to see where he goes next. But if you ask me who would I prefer, I would say Koopmeiners. I'll give you a reason why. To be captain of Arsenal Alkmaar is no mean feat, and he's also captained the Dutch national team at youth international level. He's a real young player. He's really got a fantastic head on his shoulders, and he's a great dead ball specialist from free kicks and penalties. Very rarely does he miss a penalty. There was one, I remember he played a Dutch international game against Portugal, and the reporter said to him, he said, your penalty skills, he says, they're amazing. He said, can you tell me what you do? He said, well, I just put the ball down, I choose my spot, I turn around and I whack it as hard as I can. Simple but effective. And but I think another name which I've stated that I would like is about Weghorst at Wolfsburg. He's a fantastic striker. I've rated him since his days at Heracles here, and he was really, really good. He scored a lot of goals for RZ, scored a lot of goals for Wolfsburg, and he could offer Arsenal something different. And he's criminally overlooked at international level. When the Netherlands reached the Nations League final against Portugal, they needed someone like Wout Weghorst, and they didn't have him. And I think he must be going bananas at what he's got to do to get a cap, because he's an excellent player. But whether Arsenal will look into the Dutch market, I'm not so sure. But a very good observation on both questions, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, there are so many underrated players in the Eredivisie. It's criminal that we don't mention them often, especially with the. I would argue that Ajax are the four founding fathers of how modern football is being played at the minute. And sorry, I've just gone off. Let me just come back on. And there's so many players that have come through the ranks, like Hakim Ziyech. You're talking about the likes of Donny van der Beek. I think he's been wasted at United. Even Premier League players that are going over there that are ripping it up, like Tadic. Blind, etc., etc. But I want to take it back to today's game, and I want to talk about some of the repercussions of the way that we performed in the second half, and what that shows me going forward. So, look, the first half for me was a half of Arsenal starting strong. We've seen it before. Often, Arteta demands the players to start on fifth gear and to almost intimidate the opposition, to try and to force them to sit back so that we can create the dominance for ourselves in the game. They did that really well. It's a great goal by Aubameyang. It's, I think, 4 passes only needed to find Aubameyang in that opportunity, in that space. Very similar to a goal he scored very recently. I forgot against who, might be against Leeds. But it seems as if he's going for the bottom right, and then he hits it in the near post. Great goal. And then things start to decline a little bit. And it's worrying because I've seen it before. I've seen it. It's almost a common theme at Arsenal where they get the first goal and then they start to become a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more arrogant. And that's the word I'd use to describe the performance I saw today. It was a very arrogant performance with 11 players on the pitch who genuinely believed that they were better than their opposition, and by default they were going to play a style of football, a brand of football, which didn't need to look good, which didn't need to be good, because quote unquote we're better than the opposition, or we're going to beat them. If it's 1-0, let it stay 1-0. We're going to pass in and around our box. We're going to pass it very slowly. We're going to walk. We're not going to jog. We're not going to run. There doesn't need to be any creativity, and ultimately we conceded because of that arrogance. And then we go into the second half, and the second half for me is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting, because Arsenal, quite typically, not quite typically, when they usually come out of the second half, it does take a little bit of it takes a bit of while for them to start to get the gears in motion and start to play their football. I didn't expect it to take until the 81st minute for them to come into action. But what really struck me was the brand of football they then started to play. And Arteta mentions this. And one of the reasons why I was absolutely fuming, pulling my hair out at the end of the game, is because I couldn't quite work out whose idea it was to implement playing Burnley style of football against them. Because at one point it was as if football tennis had come alive. You had the ball going from Burnley's end to Arsenal's end for a long ball. Someone picks it up on our side, a long ball back, long ball back, long ball back. And that was for about 20 to 25 minutes. And Arteta made the comment. He said he couldn't understand why we were playing their game against them. And that for me is the biggest issue, because the brand of football that Arteta has introduced is an attractive one, is one that works, is one which is similar to what he would have been playing at Man City against Pep, something that he wants to perfect. Why not go with it? What was the main reason for why Arsenal decided to abandon playing football on the grass and then start pinging balls over the top?
I think it's. I think it might be a little bit of arrogance, in all honesty, to think we can turn it on and do what we please and we'll still get over the line. I think the panic in the last 10 minutes, especially the last 5 minutes, it was like a pinball machine football at times. Where obviously Ceballos hitting the post as well, and I think that the panic setting in. They've got to be seen to doing something. And the same balls, the same passes were being played. I thought the only one that was really trying something different was Saka. But I think, if you're completely honest, the draw was a fair result today. If you're completely honest, and a big week with Olympiacos and Tottenham as well. But I think for Arsenal fans as well, to think that we can roll over teams and just turn up, even in the predicament we're in, I think it just kind of shows how they don't really quite get what the situation is at Arsenal. It's as if they've forgotten what happened when we lost at home to Aston Villa, lost at home to Leicester, drew away to Leeds when they should have battered us about 4-0 that day, losing the North London derby. I don't think Arteta's won a North London derby yet, and that's also a huge talking point, because I can't see us winning at home next Sunday. I think it'll be a draw, actually. And for an Arsenal manager not to have won a North London derby in what will be, I believe, 4 attempts, I think it'll be very very interesting to see how that's taken, and or 3 attempts, I believe, and be interesting to see how that goes. But I just think maybe their minds were also on Thursday. But as I say, we're very much a reflection of the players at the minute. You've got David Luiz telling all and sundry that he's going to sign for Benfica. You've got Martin Odegaard knowing that he's going to return to Real Madrid. You've got Thomas Partey, who's apparently still settling in, having arrived quite some time ago now on a hefty price tag. You've got Aubamayang on a huge deal, massive deal, and on huge wages as well. Lacazette, maybe thinking that he can get a better deal as well. So we're just a collection of islands at the minute, and very difficult to find a collective in that respect.
Do you think the summer transfer window, which is coming up, is the most important in the club's history?
That's a really good question. So I'd say in the modern era, yes. Okay. Because if we don't get it right this summer, and do you know the thing for this summer, Fala, that's really interesting for me? We've got to have the guts and the bottle to make what could be seen as unpopular decisions. We've got to have the conviction to be able to do that. For me, that's more important than who we actually buy. Because obviously I know of Colt Miners, people have spoken about it, and you just know that if Arsenal was to sign Colt Miners, you'd have a lot of people saying, "Oh, why are we signing from the Eredivisie? They're all rubbish," without thinking and looking about what the player has achieved. And he was also linked with Leeds last summer, I believe. And maybe they'll sneak in ahead of us. Who knows? But it's we've got to have the conviction to make unpopular decisions, and we've got to identify players better. I mean, I spoke about Colt Miners and Weghorst, Suai Fedal at Sporting Lisbon. There's some fantastic players. You just have to look hard enough. Thauvin at Marseille. He was. People often talk about his time at Newcastle and being a flop, but Thauvin even said he was never so unhappy in his career, especially off the pitch, when he was at Newcastle. When he returned to Marseille, they reached the European final, and that's not a freak of nature. That's not a coincidence. So there's some very, very good. Sven Botman as well at Lille. People talk about him leaving Ajax when he was loaned out to Heerenveen. Sven Botman will go on to have a very good career. He's literally been drafted into the Dutch national team together with the likes of the future of the central defence of the Netherlands, the likes of Van Dijk, likes of Matthijs de Ligt, the likes of Sven Botman. Sven Botman at Lille now is a very good player. I think Premier League clubs are keeping tabs on him, but you can't stockpile players. I see a lot of, especially with the younger generation of Arsenal fans on Twitter, they like to be the first to be in the know. They like to be the first to say, "Oh, I said that. Oh, I said that. Oh, I said that." I'll give you an example. Do you remember Philip Sandler, who signed for Manchester City from Pep Zwolle?
I don't know.
He signed from Pep Zwolle to Manchester City, and I was one of the first people to interview him one-to-one since that transfer broke. And this is going back in 2018. And I said to him, I said, "How does someone go from Pep Zwolle in the Netherlands to Manchester City?" He said, "Well, I had choices in the Netherlands." He said, "But Manchester City really sold it to me." He said, "They really, really sold it to me." He said, "They told me that I would be training with the likes of Aguero, the likes of David Silva." And I thought, "Oh, it'd be fantastic." And he ended up playing very few games and was subsequently loaned out to Anderlecht. And this is what I mean about the human element of football. You can't stockpile players. It's not fantasy football. Yes, you're not always going to get it right. But I think specifically with the fan base, obviously in my position interviewing professional players and managers, my perspective is different. But I just get the feeling with some Arsenal fans on Twitter, it's very much they want to be seen to be in the know, but yet they've never spoken to that player. They couldn't tell you who that player played for 2 clubs before. They couldn't tell you who that player was managed by in recent years. And these are all the little small facets that you need to do and not just kind of pluck names out of thin air, really.
And you actually, having made those comments, you remind me of what AC Milan used to do back in the 70s or the 80s, where they would really look at an individual player and look past their talents. And I think it was the case when they signed Edgar Davids. Did they sign Edgar Davids AC Milan?
Davids did play for AC Milan, but Edgar Davids as well achieved, like with Seedorf, they both achieved so much at such a young age. And, under the tutelage of Van Gaal, that famous Ajax team of 95, Patrick Kluivert as well, they all achieved so much at a young age. And when you achieve that at such a young age, when you become European champion in your European club champion in your early 20s, it's bound to do something with you. And you say about Milan as well, this is they used to be the Rolls Royce of Italy, really, and they've kind of fallen off a little bit. But I mean, Arrigo Sacchi as well. I mean, there's a famous story that Van Basten tells where Arrigo Sacchi had the likes of Rijkaard, Gullit, and Van Basten, and Arrigo Sacchi would do like a training module, and he'd literally have a stopwatch, and he'd set up the defense, and he would say to his strikers, that amazing Milan team, right, you've got about 7 minutes to try and score a goal against this formation. And Arrigo Sacchi had them so well drilled that the defence was just marvellous. And fantastic manager, Arrigo Sacchi. I think he's somewhat overlooked. Really, I do. 1 minute he was a shoe salesman, next minute you're European champion. Only in football, eh?
Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the player that I was thinking of in my head was Frank Rijkaard. So, I read in a book, Ruud Gullit wrote How to Watch Football or something like that. It was a sort of an autobiography, and in it he was telling the story how Milan, before they made the purchase of Rijkaard, they approached Gullit and they asked him, "Look, what is he like? We want to know everything about his personality. We're not too keen to sign him because he seems too quiet. He seems X, Y, and Z." And Gullit convinced them in the end to sign him. But I think you make a fantastic case and a good point about considering the personality of a football club, and but always bearing in mind the importance of whether a player is gonna fit into the team or not. We saw it with Torreira, and we saw it with Guendouzi. 2 really unique cases, with one being homesick and not adapting to the Premier League, not adapting to England, and with one almost adapting too quickly and being too confident and too bullish and too outspoken. And now both of them are ultimately forced out, and 2 great talents that could have been utilized elsewhere. But I mean, look, I wanted to ask you, swaying away from this game, we know what the problems are. we sort of have an idea of what the solutions are. How much do Arsenal need to spend in the summer to turn this around? I mean, considering that the ownership support and give Arteta what he needs, what do Arsenal need to do in terms of finances? How much are we looking at?
Well, I think first and foremost we need to sell. I
Mm,
think, and that will top up what
mm,
potential war chest they have. But again, this isn't fantasy football. This isn't I've got the most money. This isn't Championship Manager. We're talking about real money in the middle of a pandemic. And also, if you've got people struggling worldwide, if you've got countries struggling worldwide, it's irresponsible to go out and sign players when you have the youth academy in positions where you could also utilise that. You know, we've got to go for our youth academy with a fine tooth comb. You know, you've got the likes of Mark McGuinness and Daniel Ballard that are both good enough to
mm,
play for Arsenal. So if we go out and sign another central defender, that's the end of their road, isn't it? It's the same with Gabriel. Gabriel, before he signed for Lille, was playing for Dynamo Zagreb and was loaned out to Soir in France. And then all of a sudden, he's playing for Arsenal. But nobody could tell you who he signed for before he played for Lille. But they all thought he was world class because he played for Lille. And same with Nicolas Pepe. You know, when he played for Lille and he had that amazing season. You know, we unfortunately we've got a lot of fans, Fardan, who love to kind of be in the moment of, oh, that player's amazing. He's just, but it's not about the price tag. It's about characters. You know, I would love us to sign someone like Aubamayang, someone with Premier League
yeah.
winning experience, someone who works so hard. It's like, for example, I spoke to Dean Hammond, who played for Leicester, played with Jamie Vardy, and played with Mark Albrighton. And he said something very interesting to me. He said when Leicester won that league, he said a lot of people thought that those balls over the top from Albrighton was just luck, just fell out of the sky. They was all on point. Mark Albrighton is a fantastic player. And he's a player that I would love to see signed for Arsenal. But of course, I'm not going to look at someone like him. But I just think we've got to identify players better. I think we've got to sell first. I think Hector Bellerin, I think he's reached the end of the line, I think. If offers do come in for Xhaka and Lacazette, we've got to look at them as well. We've got to not be sentimental, and we've got to not be afraid to make unpopular decisions. You know, this isn't a video game. This is a real football club where, for fans that view themselves as big celebrities or influencers or whatever they may be, in the grand scheme of things, their opinion is of no importance whatsoever. None. But yet, for example, if their favourite player is sold, or the player they speak to on Instagram is sold, they would have a fit. But if it's in the best interest of the football club going forward, it's what needs to be done. And I just think we've got to come away from the the fans. Yes, fans do have a certain amount of influence on a football club, but in the case of Arsenal, certainly not as much as what some fans actually think. And we've kind of got to come away from that and go back to basics a little bit in the way that we used to be. And be very interesting to see if we can do it.
Very interesting indeed. And you make a good point about making the hard decisions, and it almost reminds me of very recent times when Aubameyang signed his contract. Was it the right choice to make? Did Arsenal make the right choice by offering that contract? Could we have potentially have sold him and got someone like Malen from the Netherlands who's doing so well, investing in young and then seeing them nurture themselves in the Premier League, giving them that year to adjust, because we often forget the human element of it is so crucial and so important.
Absolutely. A lot of Arsenal fans seem to think that we should not target certain players because they have no resale value. I can't believe that. You've got people who have big accounts on Twitter telling a big part of the fan base, oh, we shouldn't go for that player because he's got no resale value. But what about his experience on the pitch? What about his title winning experience? What about his international experience? What about his career experience in football management and closing out a game of football? These are things that you very rarely read about, and for me, they're things that are vitally important.
James, I can't thank you enough, honestly, for coming on here. I mean, I didn't quite prepare myself to be to take in as much information as I have, and it's been so refreshing. I mean, I thought it was going to be an hour where I was just going to vent and rant, but this has been very, very educational, very insightful, and I'm really, really glad that you messaged to ask whether you can come on, because it's been a real pleasure. We touched on a lot of the things that go in and around football in the background. We've grasped the importance of the human element of it, making sure that clubs are considering this, making sure that fans are remembering that footballers are human beings, and not just to look at the talent, but to look at whether they are capable to settle in England, at Arsenal, especially with young players having to come over without family members, etc., etc. Why don't you give us a sort of synopsis of what your career has taught you about players and some of the things that maybe fans overlook?
Well, it's a great question. First and foremost, I'll start at the top, where timing is everything in football. Timing is everything in football, from the timing of a transfer to the timing of a new manager coming in. I'll give you a couple of examples. Simon Barker, who when I spoke to him was assistant chief executive of the PFA, he's played for Queen's Park Rangers. We was talking about the time when he received the news that he was going to be drafted into the England squad, and he thought, "Wow!" He said, "I'm going to be playing for England." The following league game, he broke his leg, and he never got to play for England. And this is what I mean about the small margins. I'll give you another example. In Chris Wilder at Sheffield United is having a really tough time, but it's amazing man manager. I'll give you an example. I spoke to Sam Deering, who played under him at Oxford, and on the eve of the season, he broke his leg, and he thought, "Oh no," he said, "I'm going to be completely forgotten about. I'm going to fade away. The club's not going to want me." And bearing in mind, this is the third division, and Chris Wilder said, "Look," he said, "you've had an awful injury." He said, "We're going to get you the best treatment. We're going to look after you. You're not going to be forgotten about. You're going to be part of our promotion push." He was out for the majority of the season, and he come back, and he was part of his promotion push. And these are the stories that I like to convey in my interviews. I spoke to Jamie Carragher about being a one club man, and he said, "I said, did you ever come close to leaving Liverpool?" He said, "No." He said, "Fortunately, it never got that far." He said, "But there were a fair few clubs sniffing around Steven Gerrard at the time." And also nice to go back in time with the likes of Bob Wilson and Kevin Campbell, to learn from the great Arsenal legend of Bob Wilson how the 1970-71 side came to be after the shame of losing the 1969 Cup final. Speaking to Kevin Campbell, he was eulogised about a great teacher in the game is George Graham, and my next interview will be with Cohen Bramall, who signed from Huddersfield Town to Arsenal. That will be my 300th publication on the Secret Footballer website this Wednesday. So it'll be nice to have a great milestone, but it's been a 4.5-year journey of starting out interviewing Dutch players and managers in their mother tongue, going to different publishers coming in for me. I didn't expect, for example, the publisher of the Secret Footballer to come in for me, but they kept an eye on me for quite some time, and they read a lot of my interviews, and they were really pleased with what they saw. And I'm really excited with what's coming up. There's so much good quality stuff coming up from all levels of world football. Also the women's game as well. I've been really fortunate, especially with the Dutch women's team. Half of the team that started the World Cup final, I managed to speak to half of them. It really is a joy to interview Dutch players and managers in their mother tongue, because you can get so much more information. It's about making sure that players feel comfortable. I am just a football writer, but I have 5 years experience, and a lot of clubs looking on the LinkedIn, which is great. It'd be a real dream to work for a professional club one day on the media side. That's the main goal for me. And I had in the last week or so, news come through that people working for the Republic of Ireland national team and Ipswich have been looking at my profile, which is good. But it's also nice to go onto different platforms and let people know different things, because I think there's so many voices now, Farhan. There's so many voices that you don't, you get so much information. It's not always on Twitter. The biggest account is the best account. I use Twitter as another way to share my interviews, to share my opinion, and it's something which is very important for people listening tonight that have really enjoyed it. You can follow me on @JamesRowe the Secret Footballer publish my interviews every Wednesday. Football CFB, who is another publisher of mine, publish every Monday, plus an archive feature. So there's many stories to be told. I'm always quite flexible with answering questions on Dutch football or Arsenal and giving people the time of day. And as I say, Ferdinand, it's been a great journey. I mean, I when I started out, I didn't think I'd reach 300 professional players and managers, the likes of Graham Potter and Viv Anderson as well, of course. But it's about treating everybody the same. Whether you are Jamie Carragher, whether you are a Dutch player playing in Switzerland, a professional career goes by in the blink of an eye, and everybody has a story to tell.
And look, James, you have the most unique perspective out of all of us, and it's really refreshing, like I say, to hear from your perspective how you see things in the footballing world. It's really been an insight, and it's been a really good insight because, like I said, I was really down and beaten after the Burnley result, but this for me has added more value than than the Burnley game has. So look, once again, James, thank you very much for coming on. You've really, blown us out of the water. You guys can find James on Twitter, as he said, James Rowe NL, a football journalist who has publications with the likes of, as you say, just whilst I try and pull up your profile on Twitter, Football CFB and Secret Footballer. He's also been featured on Talk Sport and Love Sport Radio. So, much love, James, for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Look forward to it. Best of luck with the channel. Look forward to speaking soon. And thank you for everybody for watching, and for the viewers' questions as well. I tip my hat because they were very interesting indeed. So I look forward to speaking soon.
All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot. See you later.
All the best. Bye-bye.